I always thought I was a rational person, the kind who wouldn't be easily spooked by strange noises or eerie feelings. But that was before I moved to Willow Creek, a sleepy little town nestled deep in the heart of the forest. It started innocently enough. A rustle in the bushes as I walked home from work, a feeling of being watched as I passed by the old abandoned house on the corner. At first I brushed it off as my imagination running wild in the darkness. After all, Willow Creek was known for its ghost stories and urban legends. But then the shadows started to follow me. It was subtle at first, just a flicker out of the corner of my eye or a feeling of unease that prickled the back of my neck. But as the days passed, the shadows grew bolder, creeping closer with each passing night. I tried to tell myself it was just my overactive imagination, that there was a logical explanation for the strange occurrences. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something was hunting me, something that existed beyond the realm of logic and reason. I began to dread the walk home from work, my heart pounding in my chest with each step I took. Every shadow seemed to stretch and contort, reaching out to grab me as I hurried past. I tried to convince myself that I was being paranoid, that there was nothing to fear but the darkness itself. But then I saw it, a shape lurking just beyond the edge of the forest, its eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. I froze in terror, unable to tear my gaze away from the creature that watched me with hungry eyes. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. It simply waited, biding its time until it was ready to strike. I wanted to run, to flee back to the safety of my home and lock the doors against the horrors that lurked outside. But something held me in place, rooted to the spot as if I were a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming car. And then, with a suddenness that left me breathless, the creature vanished into the darkness, leaving me alone with my fear. I stumbled home in a daze, my mind racing with 1,000 questions and no answers to be found. Who or what was hunting me? And why had it chosen me as its prey? I tried to convince myself that it was just a trick of the light, a figment of my overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew the truth. The shadows were real, and they were coming for me. As the days passed, the attacks grew more frequent, more violent. I would wake in the middle of the night to find claw marks etched into the walls of my bedroom, or hear the sound of scratching at the windows as if something were trying to claw its way inside. I tried to tell the townsfolk about what was happening, but they just looked at me with pitying eyes and murmured about the curse that had plagued Willow Creek for generations. They told me to leave, to flee before it was too late. But I couldn't leave. I was trapped, caught in a nightmare from which there was no escape. And as the shadows closed in around me, I knew that my time was running out. I sit alone in my darkened room, my heart pounding in my chest as I wait for the inevitable. The shadows swirl and dance around me, taunting me with their whispered promises of death and destruction. I know that I should be afraid, that I should be fighting for my life. But deep down, I welcome the darkness, welcome the sweet release that it promises. For in the end, we all belong to the shadows. And no matter how hard we try to escape, they will always find us in the end. The night air was heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth as I walked home from work, my footsteps echoing through the empty streets of Willow Creek. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist with each passing moment. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest as a sense of unease settled over me like a heavy blanket. I could feel the eyes of unseen watchers boring into my back, their gaze filled with a hunger that sent shivers down my spine. I glanced over my shoulder, but there was nothing there, just the darkness, swallowing everything in its path. I shook my head, trying to dispel the irrational fear that gripped me. I was being silly, I told myself. There was nothing to fear but the darkness itself. But then I heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible above the rustle of the leaves and the chirping of crickets. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as I strained to hear the source of the sound. It came again, closer this time. A voice, low and guttural, filled with a hunger that sent a cold chill down my spine. I turned to run, but before I could take a single step, I felt a hand close around my wrist, pulling me back into the shadows. I struggled against the unseen assailant, my heart pounding in my chest as I fought to break free. But the grip only tightened, digging into my flesh with a strength that belied its ethereal form. And then, with a suddenness that left me reeling, the shadows parted, revealing the creature that lurked within. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. A twisted mass of darkness and decay, its eyes gleaming with a malevolent light as it leered down at me with a hunger that sent a cold chill down my spine. I screamed, the sound echoing through the silent streets as I struggled to break free from its grasp. But it was no use. The creature held me fast, its grip unyielding as it dragged me deeper into the darkness. I knew then that I was doomed, that no matter how hard I fought, I would never escape the clutches of the shadows that followed. And as the darkness closed in around me, swallowing me whole, I knew that I would never be seen again, that I would become just another victim of the curse that had plagued Willow Creek for generations. For in the end, we all belong to the shadows, and no matter how hard we try to fight against them, they will always find a way to consume us in the end. I never believed in ghosts or the supernatural. Growing up, I scoffed at tales of haunted houses and restless spirits, dismissing them as nothing more than fanciful stories concocted to scare children into obedience. But that was before I moved to the city and encountered something that defied all rational explanation. It started innocently enough. I had just moved into a quaint little apartment on the outskirts of town, eager to start fresh in a new city far from the troubles of my past. The first few weeks were blissfully uneventful, filled with unpacking and exploring my new surroundings. But then, the whispers started. At first, they were barely audible, little more than a soft murmur in the back of my mind. I brushed them off as my imagination playing tricks on me, the product of too many late nights spent alone in my new apartment. But as the days passed, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They followed me everywhere I went, lurking in the shadows just beyond the reach of my hearing. I tried to ignore them, to drown them out with music and television, but nothing could silence the relentless voice that echoed through the empty rooms of my apartment. I began to lose sleep, my nights filled with fitful dreams and restless tossing and turning. The whispers invaded my thoughts, twisting and distorting them until I could no longer trust my own mind. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, like I was being pulled into a darkness from which there was no escape. And then one night, I saw it. A figure standing at the foot of my bed, its eyes gleaming with a malevolent light as it watched me with an intensity that sent a cold chill down my spine. I wanted to scream, to flee from the creature that lurked in the darkness, but I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. The figure moved closer, its movements slow and deliberate, as it reached out a hand to touch me. I could feel its icy fingers brushing against my skin, sending a shiver of revulsion coursing through my body. And then, with a suddenness that left me breathless, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving me alone in the darkness. I lay there for what felt like hours, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. But deep down, I knew the truth. The whispers, the figure in the darkness, they were real, and they were coming for me. I tried to tell myself that I was imagining things, that there was a logical explanation for what I had seen, but deep down, I knew that was a lie. There was something in my apartment, something that defied all rational explanation. I tried to leave, to flee from the horrors that lurked within the walls of my apartment, but no matter how far I ran, the whispers followed me, taunting me with their whispered promises of death and destruction. And then one night, as I lay alone in my bed, I heard a voice whispering my name. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest as I scanned the room for any sign of the intruder, but there was nothing there, just the empty darkness of my apartment. And then, with a suddenness that left me reeling, the whispers stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. I knew then that I was not alone, that whatever had been haunting me was still out there, lurking in the shadows just beyond the reach of my sight. I wanted to scream, to flee from the darkness that threatened to consume me. But deep down, I knew that there was no escape. For in the end, we all belong to the darkness, and it will always find a way to claim us in the end. The nights grew longer, the whispers more incessant, as if the darkness itself was alive and hungry, feeding on my fear. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes followed my every move, even in the supposed safety of my own home. I became a prisoner in my own apartment, afraid to leave its confines for fear of what lurked in the shadows beyond. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the windows, sent my heart racing with terror. But despite my fear, I couldn't bring myself to leave. Something held me in that apartment, something darker and more insidious than the whispers that haunted my every waking moment. And then, one night, as I lay in bed, trying in vain to block out the incessant whispers, I heard a new sound. A scratching at the window, faint at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as I strained to listen. The scratching continued, growing more urgent, more desperate, until it filled the room with its deafening cacophony. With trembling hands, I slowly rose from my bed, inching closer to the window with a sense of dread that threatened to consume me. I reached out a hand, hesitating for a moment before pulling back the curtain to reveal the source of the noise, but there was nothing there. Just the empty darkness of the night, stretching out before me like an endless void. I stared out into the abyss, searching for any sign of the creature that had been haunting me for so long, but there was nothing to be seen. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the scratching stopped, replaced once again by the eerie silence that seemed to suffuse my apartment like a thick fog. I stumbled back from the window, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. But deep down, I knew that there was no rational explanation for the horrors that lurked within the walls of my apartment. I was alone, trapped in a nightmare from which there was no waking. And as the whispers grew louder, more insistent, I knew that my time was running out. I tried to reach out for help, to tell someone, anyone, about the darkness that threatened to consume me. But the words caught in my throat, drowned out by the relentless whispers that echoed through the empty rooms of my apartment. And then, one night, as I lay alone in the darkness, I heard a voice speaking to me. It was soft at first, barely audible above the incessant whispers that filled the air. But as I strained to listen, the voice grew louder, more distinct, until it filled the room with its chilling presence. I knew then that there was no escape, no reprieve from the horrors that lurked within the shadows, for in the end, we all belong to the darkness, and it will always find a way to claim us in the end. The breakup had shattered me. It wasn't just the end of a relationship, it felt like the end of everything. Sarah, the one person I thought would always be by my side, had walked away without a second glance, leaving me alone in a world that suddenly seemed cold and empty. In a desperate attempt to heal my broken heart, I retreated to my family's remote cabin nestled deep in the heart of the forest. Surrounded by towering trees and the soothing sounds of nature, I hoped to find solace in the tranquility of the wilderness. But the peace I sought was short-lived. It started with small things I could easily dismiss as figments of my imagination. A rustle in the bushes outside my window, a flicker of movement in the darkness beyond the trees. At first, I brushed it off as my mind playing tricks on me, the product of too many sleepless nights spent alone in the wilderness. But then, the noises grew louder, more persistent. I would wake in the middle of the night to the sound of scratching at the windows, as if something were trying to claw its way inside. I told myself it was just an animal, a raccoon or a squirrel searching for food. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. There was something out there, something watching me from the shadows. I tried to ignore it, to bury myself in distractions and pretend that everything was fine. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me like a dark cloud. And then, one night, as I lay alone in my bed, I heard it. A voice, soft and melodic, echoing through the darkness like a siren's call. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I strained to listen to the haunting melody that filled the air. It was beautiful, mesmerizing, but there was something about it that sent a shiver of fear coursing through my veins. I couldn't place it, couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was that made my skin crawl, but I knew that whatever was singing to me was not human. I wanted to run, to flee from the darkness that threatened to consume me. But something held me in place, rooted to the spot as if I were a puppet on a string. And then, with a suddenness that left me breathless, the singing stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. I lay there for what felt like hours, my mind racing with 1,000 questions and no answers to be found. Who or what was singing to me? And why had it chosen me as its audience? I wanted to leave, to flee from the horrors that lurked within the forest. But something held me back, some primal instinct that told me to stay and face whatever was out there. So I stayed, trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. And as the days passed and the singing grew louder, more insistent, I knew that my time was running out. I tried to tell myself that it was just a trick of the wind, a figment of my overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. For in the end, we all belong to the darkness. And no matter how hard we try to fight against it, it will always find a way to claim us in the end. The days blurred into nights, each one filled with the same haunting melody that seemed to seep through the very walls of the cabin. I tried to drown it out with music, with the sound of my own voice raised in song, but nothing could silence the relentless call that echoed through the darkness. I began to lose track of time, of reality itself, as the boundary between dreams and waking life blurred into nothingness. I would wake in the middle of the night to find myself standing at the edge of the forest, drawn there by some unseen force that whispered promises of salvation in my ear. But every time I tried to step into the darkness, something held me back, a voice of reason that screamed for me to run, to flee from the horrors that lurked within the shadows. I knew then that I was not alone in the forest, that there was something out there, something watching me with hungry eyes. And as the days passed and the whispers grew louder, more insistent, I knew that my time was running out. I tried to leave, to flee from the darkness that threatened to consume me. But every time I tried to run, I found myself back at the cabin, as if some unseen force were guiding my footsteps, leading me inexorably back to the place where it all began. And then, one night, as I lay alone in my bed, I heard a voice speaking to me. It was soft at first, barely audible above the incessant whispers that filled the air. But as I strained to listen, the voice grew louder, more distinct, until it filled the room with its chilling presence. I knew then that there was no escape, no reprieve from the horrors that lurked within the forest. For in the end, we all belong to the darkness, and it will always find a way to claim us in the end. But as the voice spoke to me, weaving its web of lies and deceit, I knew that I would not go quietly into the night. I would fight with every ounce of strength I had left to break free from the darkness that threatened to consume me. For in the end, we all have a choice. And even in the darkest of nights, there is still a glimmer of hope, a flicker of light that refuses to be extinguished.